Welcome to this lesson on further creative writing. Now, this is relevant to area of study students who are currently in Year 11 Standard or Year 11 Advanced English. In previous videos, we've already examined the basics of creative writing for your area of study. However, in this video, we're going to extend on some of those ideas and look at how we can make your work even better. Now, the first idea, which I have proposed to you, is to create a creative writing bank. Now, this will allow you to be prepared for any exam situation. Essentially, a creative writing bank is just your compilation of all of your ideas, structures, characters, plots, themes, anything you can think of. This will ensure that you not only have one complete story prepared and well learnt, perhaps even memorized, but that you also have something else to fall back on when perhaps the stimulus is a little bit funny and it doesn't quite fit what you've already prepared. A bank of characters, settings, motifs, and plots will allow you to always be familiar with the content you're writing about. Just like if you were writing an essay, you wouldn't want to be making things up on the spot and thinking of quotes which you hadn't thought about in months. When you're doing a creative writing piece, you really want to have your bank to fall back on so that you always are familiar with your content and that your writing's going to be flowing because the ideas are already solidly explored in your mind. Automatic writing is another thing which you can use in order to increase the quality of your writing. Now, we've all been in those situations where we get into an exams and we seem like we're going to blank. Perhaps you look at your creative writing stimulus and it really has nothing to do with the story that you've prepared. However, instead of completely blanking and not writing anything down, the technique which you can employ is called automatic writing, or ghost writing, where the ghost inside you takes over. Now, this technique you can use for two different concepts. You can either use it actually in exams if you blank, or you can, more importantly, use it as a training exercise. Because what it does is it allows you to write down any thought that comes into your mind without editing it. So as the ideas come into your mind, you're writing them down on the page as quickly as you possibly can, getting out all your thoughts, all your stream of consciousness written down. This will allow you to build the discipline of writing and means that there's going to be something on the page. Often what happens is that once you get going with this, you're really able to then think of an idea, snap back into form, and then produce a creative piece exactly as you planned. So it's a really good way of getting your head in that right space to produce a good piece of writing. So, as we've discussed in creative writing, it's not just about the story which you've prepared, it's about using the stimulus. And in particular, it's about using the stimulus to build a character. So, you must use the stimulus to inspire you and then to start your writing. You're not just describing what's in the picture, but you're using it as an inspiration to do with your area of study theme. So, you're deconstructing the image, not just how it looks, but really how it feels, what the essence behind it is, and perhaps what some of the characters' connotations could be for your area of study story. It's also important to realize that if your stimulus doesn't contain a person, say it contains an animal or an inanimate object, that's definitely something which you can use to create a character. Characters don't always have to be people. So if we look at this picture, for example, we're not just saying he has brown eyes, we're asking, who is this man? What is his job? What are his interests? These sort of questions which get your mind flowing, get you asking yourself, who is this character? How can I relate it to my area of study? What's his family like? So perhaps if your area of study was belonging, you could use an exploration of this man's family to represent belonging to a family. Things like that which really get you thinking about the area of study at a deeper level. So, while you're creating a setting, you must ask yourself a number of questions in order to create a setting which is both authentic, interesting, and also highly creative. So you're asking yourself, is it a fictional place or a non-fictional place? How big is the setting? How will the feel of the setting impact your story? All of these different elements which you have to consider, because obviously the impact of the setting is going to be pretty substantial. If you choose a terrible setting which you're unfamiliar with, you can't really describe properly, and you can't work with, your story as a whole isn't going to be as accurate and interesting. Also, when you're considering the fictional or non-fictional aspect, it's really important to note that the Board of Studies prefers realist writing rather than fantasy. And this is probably to do with the fact that realist writing is, as a general rule, of a higher quality due to the familiarity leads to authenticity golden rule, which we previously discussed. You also need to make sure that you've either been there to the setting or that you truly know what it's like. So don't just imagine what it's like, but go and look at pictures or go and read information and then use that to reconstruct your setting through your narrative. You need to also make sure that you have a well thought out details of your non-fictional place. So you really know those little details which are going to make you stand out to the marker. Details are obviously the most important thing in a story and make you stand out from the average candidate. Little details to do with your character, little details to do with your setting, all of these sort of elements build up your story and create a really cohesive story which addresses a number of issues. You're then asking yourself, how big is this setting? So it's really important to balance a setting which is small and manageable with also one that has enough scope for something actually interesting to happen in the setting. So while you might think, oh, okay, I'll set my story in an entire country, that's too broad and generic to really successfully be able to create a setting. So perhaps something like the world or a country is going to be too large a setting for you to really build it and construct it properly. However, something like a community or village, a neighbourhood, or a house are perhaps at a more manageable level so that your descriptive language skills can really take over and completely construct this setting at an excellent level. You also need to consider the impact of feeling. Now, obviously, all of these factors are dealing with each other, and the size is going to impact feeling. So you're thinking things like, is the setting overwhelming, scary, busy, or modern? So you might be considering, for example, a girl who's moved from the country to the city and is finding it difficult to belong in this big town. Is it comforting, safe, or familiar? So, for example, if you're looking at a story about a mother and a child reading a bedtime story and how they belong in a family unit, that could be a really interesting way of addressing that theme. Is it boring, constrictive, or limiting? For example, an office worker who feels like he doesn't belong to his artificial environment. Is it exciting, new, and challenging? For example, an astronaut who's ventured to another planet and felt like he's found belonging in something greater than his own Earth. Or is it sinister, dark, and mysterious? These are all different moods which you can consider to create a setting which is not only accurate, but also really sensory and interesting to read. So things that once the marker is reading them, they're going to be engaged and interested to read more and feel like they really are there in that particular setting.